So we're going to get started right on time, almost on time, with an overview for you of the ASCEXAM, and this will be given to you by Dr. Teig and Dr. Wiggers, and they'll be talking to you about helpful strategies and other issues.
Thank you. Is my mic on? Okay, great. I'm Susan Wiggers. I'm also from Temple, and I'm happy to welcome you to Philadelphia. I would like to make sure to invite you to my hometown of Boston for the ASE Scientific Sessions in June. It's not advancing. Oh, sorry. Okay, as Dr. Kane pointed out, I take direction very poorly. Don't bother to answer this since you already did, and we will skip some of these slides. Can we advance? But we would like to know this and go ahead and answer, what portion of your week do you spend on echocardiography? Okay, so very few people spend their entire week, but most people spend between 10 and 30%, and that's pretty standard. And if you could just answer this question, I'm in training, private practice, practice affiliated with a hospital, hospital staff, or medical school. Okay, so most in a practice affiliated with the hospital, and private practice, we already knew that 22% were fellows in training. And the primary point of this lecture is for me to point out that the National Board of Echo is not in any way related to the American Society of Echo, which I am about to assume the presidency of. The NBE administers the exam, grades the exam, writes the questions, and the American Society of Echo has nothing to do with it. If we did, we wouldn't be able to give a review course, and I say this so that if any of you, after the exam, encounter me in an airport, you won't yell at me about questions, as has happened to me in the past. So just want to make this clear. Now, the overall basics for the test is that everybody has to go to a testing center on the same day. And these centers are in very weird places. Some of us have had the experience where our GPS couldn't find it, and I'm not kidding. They're in industrial parks and weird places. So if you can pre-visit, that's great, because if you're too late, they won't let you in. They won't let you carry anything into the exam room, no phones, no food, and no water. The good news is that the test is easier than 5 years ago. The pass rate is higher. And it's on an individual computer screen, so you can play the images as many times as you want, and there's less emphasis on physics. The bad news is that many of you who are in my generation have never taken a test on a computer before. So it's important to practice. And Dr. Teig is going to show you how. Watch your time. And there's more emphasis varying by years on quantification, diastole, than in previous years. The general overview, did I mention we don't write this test? It's a long test. Make sure you eat beforehand. There are breaks allowed, but they're timed. Dr. Teig is going to show you the tutorial. You can just Google National Board of Echo Exam to find it. These are multiple choice questions, and the NBE does not have the billions of dollars that the ABIM is alleged to have if you read Newsweek. And so the questions can be very unclear. If it's unclear for you, it's unclear for the next guy. Just do the best you can and move on. Question stems can be very, very short. And some of the people who just taken their cardiology boards found this unsettling. Last year, there were not too many questions where you had to know the exact cutoff of what EROA for MR was severe or moderate. But they kind of changed their emphasis from year to year. So I think it's important to have some idea of what cutoffs are. The questions with still frames and arrows, last year the image quality was said to be acceptable. At times in the past it hasn't been, and there were no measurements on the last exam. In the multiple choice section there are some moving clips for multiple choice questions. In general, people felt last year that they had plenty of time in this section of the exam. The cases, however, almost everyone said that they were pressed for time. And so you need to watch your time carefully. I recommend that you read the questions, all of the questions relating to the case, before you watch the clip. Because, and there may be 4 or 5 clips, because sometimes they show you clips that, while fascinating, you don't need to figure out what it is to answer the questions. So read the questions first. You can look at the images as many times as you wish, but this can lead to not having enough time, so keep track. Not all of the cases were straightforward last year, but in general the adult congenital cases were straightforward bread and butter. I'm told that tetralogy of Fallot was as complicated as it got. The congenital cases are presented in adult format. There's no pediatric triangle down. There's no Mayo format, where the right ventricle is the opposite of the standard format. The questions about the cases in general, the feedback was that they were reasonable. Last year there were no significant calculations. But this is the section where they would ask you about PISA and RV calculations, and we can't assume that there will be no calculations this year. Be very careful of the units. They may trick you by giving what looks like the right answer, but the units are wrong. The exact answer may be repeated. They may ask you about amyloid 3 times, and it's almost the same question. So don't get scared by that. It's just a feature of this exam. The research exam is physics light, and the research pass rate is very high. It's an easier test than the certification exam. You are not penalized in this test for a wrong answer, so don't leave a question blank. Dr. Teig will show you the strategy for marking questions that you don't know the answer to, but in the end, guess. Possible topics, these were some that the fellows told me were emphasized last year. Some treatment questions regarding what the echoes showed. They then asked for how you would treat the patient. There were a lot of appropriateness questions. You'll hear about, in this course, relative wall thickness, concentric remodeling versus concentric hypertrophy. There were several questions. It's important to know how to interpret strain curves, LV mass calculations, and there was some TEE, but not too much on the exam last year. So to study, I recommend that you look at a physics book. There are several available, and Dr. Edelman will be giving you some great talks. Just read through a textbook. Look at some spectral Dopplers. Learn from the appropriateness criteria published in the ASE guidelines. Learn the inappropriate criteria, the inappropriate indications, and that way you'll be set. Look at as many cases as possible. EchoSAP in past years has been too basic to study for this exam. And while the research is easier, the cases are the same. And so I want to wish you good luck from the ASC on the NBE test.
So thank you, Marty, for inviting me, and Jerry. And it's a pleasure to be back in Philadelphia and to welcome you. Good afternoon. And I'm going to drill down a little more about what the exam is all about and cover some of the similar points that Susan did. So first of all, as Susan's made clear, the NBE is not the ASE, but it does collaborate with the National Board of Medical Examiners to allow physicians to test and demonstrate their knowledge in echocardiography based on objective standards. This is the content of the exam. It hasn't changed on the website since 2010, and it includes the same typo here about myocardial contract down here. Unfortunately, unlike the ABIM examination, they do not give you a breakdown on the percentage of questions in each category. We talked about that last year at the ASE meeting. So there is no breakdown that's available. I've searched high and low for it. This is what's on the website. Also included are 3D imaging, limited amounts, but some. And I'm going to guess as time goes on, more 3D imaging on the examination. And as Susan has mentioned to you, there are strain and strain rate questions and a couple of curves on the examination. The ACE exam and the re-ACE exam are similar in that they have a 1.5 hour case block. The ACE exam, the initial certifying examination, has 3 multiple choice blocks. So us older guys that get to recert, we have 1 less block. But they're basically the same cases. And as Susan has said, I have not recertified. I've only taken the initial exam. It's lighter on physics on the recertification examination. Here's the date. I'm sure date is burned into everybody's calendar. Monday, July 20th, 2015. So the pass rate last year was slightly lower than previous years. So the pass rate for the initial examination is a little bit less than 70%. For the recert exam, it's 91%, but you've already seen, Marty has given you the data that 95% of the people who take this course pass the exam. Again, not a guarantee, but it shows that you're here, you're interested, and you're ready to go. So just about the testing centers. As Susan said, these are standardized centers. If you've taken a computer-based examination, you'll understand that. This was my first computer-based examination that I ever took. The testing centers are very similar. They're very sterile. Once you go in the room, you don't talk to anybody. They provide you, quote, all the resources necessary for a secure examination, and they heavily monitor you. So as Susan has said, these testing centers are in very nondescript places. Mine was in an industrial park outside of a major city. It may be in an office building in the center part of a city, or it may be just in an office park somewhere. So I would second what Susan said. Verify the address. Drive yourself there. Take a dry run. You don't want to be late, because if you don't get to the center at least 30 minutes before your scheduling time, you may not be admitted for your examination. And it says clearly, quote, in the website, if you arrive more than 30 minutes after your scheduled testing time, you will not be admitted. So please, I urge you, I know there's plenty of things to do and consider that day, but just get there early. So what can you bring and what's allowed? Well, the first thing is they're going to give you a scheduling permit that comes a few weeks to your email address. You must print that out and bring it with you, along with 1 form of government-issued ID with your picture on it. Otherwise, they will not admit you to the testing center. As Susan has stated, no personal items are permitted in the examining room except for you can bring soft foam earplugs, but they must be out and they will inspect them. Everything else has to go into a locker. All your cell phones, any electronic devices all have to be turned off and put in the locker. What do they provide you? There is an on-screen calculator, and I'll illustrate that for you. You cannot bring your own calculator into the room, cannot bring your watch into the room. You also get a laminated board, a dry erase marker, and an eraser to make questions. In the test center, you may be sitting next to someone who's taking a certifying exam for I don't know, surveying or something like that, or plumbing or something. Not all people there will be taking the National Board of Echo examination. So there were several people the day I was there taking the graduate record examination, for example. So the testing personnel are there to monitor the security of the examination, the integrity of the examination. They can't really answer any specific questions about the examination, except its administration. Results. You get them about 10 weeks after the examination, and your certificates come about 12 weeks after the scores are reported. So it's pretty slow and anxiety-ridden until you get the results back. So what types of questions are on the examination? A matching format where you have one best answer. You may have single or multiple images or concepts tied to a set of answers. And, of course, video case vignettes. And as Susan has already stated, all the images are displayed in a standard adult format, and I put non-Mayo in there. Since no one's from Minnesota, I don't think I'm insulting anybody today. Well, he's not here, though, yet, right? All right, so let's go through the exam tutorial, and then we can keep on time here. So give me 1 second. So the first thing is go to the website and download the exam tutorial, because the exam tutorial looks exactly like the exam. So it's going to come up now. So you're allowed, when you first get there, you have the option to take a tutorial. I'm just going to end this block, but this tutorial runs through how the examination operates. And I would suggest you go through it before you go to the examination center. Download it. It's available on the NBE website. I'm going to end this block here just for a second. Okay, let's go back here. We don't want the tutorial, we want to go to the sample. So here's the test. This is what the test exactly looks like when you're sitting in the examination room. So you're given a series of questions over here. The dot in front of each of the numerals means you have not provided an answer to that question yet. You have a calculator, simple calculator, but you will only have to make simple calculations on the test. You can write notes for each question and append them. You can delete them also after you're done. And if you have a question that's particularly bothersome to you or you're not sure and you want to go back and review, you can mark that question and you'll see the little red flag here comes up. So let's look at a few of the question formats. And again, these are similar to what's on the examination. It looks just like this, small stems. So in this question, what's the best use of tissue Doppler of the mitral annulus before routine transthoracic echo? You're provided 5 options, and as you know, it's to estimate filling pressures. This is the one you don't get on there. They don't show you the answer. That's the correct answer for this one. So in the stem over here on the left, you also have boxes around certain questions. That means that there is a series tied to a concept. So let's take a look. So as you see, the response options for the next 2 items are the same. Select one answer from each set. So they're asking you, based on a TTE, select the most appropriate view for determining systolic doming of the bicuspid valve. And you just pick the one that you believe is correct and move on to the next question. So again, same set of answers, but a different question. The sinotubular junction also the same. Okay? So there's a number of questions like this. A lot of the questions on the exam are very short stems, very short answers like this. I want to show you one with a calculator. So this is a typical question for using a calculation. And this question is getting after continuity equations. So you have to know these formulas. The continuity equation, PISA, the mitral deceleration time formula, all of those are on, in some way, shape, or form on the examination. My year when I took the exam, there were no PISA questions, but it seems like they alternate from year to year. So the first thing is you can bring up your calculator. And what's important, when you test strategize, you have to ask, what are they asking you? So they're asking you to calculate a valve area. So there's a lot of material in here that's distracting. So you have to just eliminate the distractions and say what's important. So one thing that they do on this examination consistently, and it was on my examination, and I see it on the tutorial and other people, is they always give you conveniently the left ventricular outflow tract diameter is 2 centimeters, or as Susan said, 20 millimeters. Watch the units very carefully. But that's very important for this type of question. So what we don't care about in this question the gradients, correct? We're looking at the continuity equation. So really what we want to do is multiply pi, and it's this simple, by the time velocity integral of the outflow tract, and then we divide it by the aortic time velocity integral, 63, and you come out with this number. So you'll get some that are not exact, so they're not going to ask you 0.99996. Pick the one that's closest. And the answer here is 1, and I believe hopefully that's the correct answer. And it's the correct answer, okay? So the calculators, if you're not sure about the question, you can mark it. If you say, well, I don't like this answer, you can take your mouse and put it through there, and this one, I don't like this one. You can eliminate those, you can come back. Or you can put yourself a note. I'll put the calculator down. Write yourself a little note. What the? You know what? Save it and close it. And you'll see that the note is attached here with this little pencil. Okay? Let's move on to another couple of concept type questions. So questions 9 and 10. This gets into the images. And I found when I took the examination, the images were actually quite good. And I think this is very representative of the images that I saw. So it depends on your strategy. I like to look at images first. So you can toggle through these pretty quickly. Right? And a little camera means it's an AVI type video. And this means this little looks like a standard camera. This is a video camera. The little camera looks like it's just a still. Okay, you can toggle through, and then they ask you a question. So, what's causing this patient's symptoms? So obviously this is someone who has significant pulmonary artery hypertension. There you go. And you can move on to the next one. And again, you can always go back and look at the videos, and they run very well. And this question, what's causing the septal wall motion abnormality? Obviously, you guys know that. It's elevated systolic pressure. Now, Susan has stated that there are a number of questions on the exam that have arrows pointing to them, and I found that on my examination. So here's just a typical question with an arrow pointing to something, and they say, what is this? Now, sometimes what they do, on my exam, they put an arrow in the right atrium, and it was kind of out in space. And it was very difficult to tell. They're looking at a standard structure on a TE, and what was it? So that was a little difficult. I don't know if I got the right answer or not, but this is pointing to this structure, I believe, which is a pleural effusion. Okay? And just one more key point, and we'll be done, and stay right on time. The concept of distractors and reading the question very carefully. So here's another question that has the same stem and then multiple questions coming off it to get back to a set of answers. And here they're asking you a question about fractional shortening. So that has to do with dimensions, right? So this stuff here is all distractors. Just pay very careful attention to the language. And on the next question, they ask you about fractional area change. So again, this is what matters, right? The areas, not the dimensions. So just keep that very carefully. Read each question carefully. Keep it in your mind exactly what they're trying to ask you. And you won't get confused on this examination. I think that covers the basics of the examination. I think we have 20 seconds for questions. If we can answer them. There you go. Any questions? No. Go online and do the tutorial. And I'll give you a couple other pieces of advice. One, get all of the ASE guidelines. A lot of this is guideline based, especially all the ones that have some quantification in there. Copy those and read those. And there's a great M-mode summary by Dr. Feigenbaum in the JACE several years ago. I think that's extremely important because there are M-mode tracings on the examination. Okay?
And I mean, I know you've heard it like 3 times, well, at least twice already, but I'll make it a 3rd time. I mean, really do make a dry run to the exam center. I was so glad that I did that. I recertified a year ago, and it was, again, like as has been described, in an industrial park, in Building G, Suite 102. It didn't even say ProLogic or Prometric on the door. It was just a door. And like I sheepishly peeked in because it was a Sunday, and I could see that it looked like a testing center. But I mean, you know, if you're doing that on the morning of your exam, it's just going to add to whatever anxiety, and I'm sure you're not anxious at all because you look like a very non-anxious group. But, you know, really, it sounded stupid. I thought it was, I almost laughed at myself for doing it, but I was very glad that I did.